Good evening, everybody. Michael Devine here, Gray Matters Radio, America's counselor, coming at you for another installment of Gray Matters Radio. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm one down, one host down tonight. You know, Bill could not make it in here tonight. Apparently, he's kind of sick or something. I don't know if I believe it or not, but apparently the guy's kind of sick, so I am lone wolfing it. But it's okay. We got a great show tonight. I will somehow pull this off on my own. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I mean, I kind of do need the help. I mean, America's counselor, I mean, the entire country, it's a tough client. It's a lot of people, and I need some help. But you know what? I can do the heavy lifting just for one night. So hope everyone had a good week. Had a lot of great responses from our show last week. It seems to be that mysteriously when we start covering things that really kind of chat people, resonate with people, we get messages on Twitter. So keep all the interactions coming. I love when everyone is sending all the messages and letting us know what they think, asking new questions. I dig it. That's kind of why we're doing it, and I love it. And I'm assuming this week's show is probably going to be another one of those shows where I think we're actually going to get some attention and some questions from people and some comments. I want to kind of just start right off. Tonight's guest, Dr. Eric Larson, friend of the show, he's going to be talking about Justin Amash, the congressman that decided to leave the GOP. And we'll be talking with here in a second. But, of course, it always seems as though every single week we do this show, I want to get right into the topic at hand, but then something always just seems to happen, and we have to kind of cover it and talk about it. And so, ironically, it goes right into tonight's guest, tonight's show, what we're talking about. So today, literally this morning, I'm drinking my coffee, just enjoying myself. Beautiful day up here in Ohio, and apparently Donald Trump decided to tweet this morning. And basically, the long and short of his tweet was basically responding to basically all the ultra liberal faction, basically the new congresswomen that have basically come in, and he basically singled them out, saying, you know, your countries are basically messed up. You should go back home to where it is that you came from. Now, I know my wife, when she saw that, was like, I can't believe he said that. I'm like, well, I mean, I can't believe that he said it, but it can be one of those things. We'll have some outrage for a little bit, and it'll just be something that just gets swept underneath the rug. They'll rationalize it for why it wasn't racist. The people think it's racist will say it's racist, and then we'll just rinse and repeat, go back and forth. Nothing will happen, and then until the next thing that's said. So that's why I'm not even going to waste any time on what he talked about. But the angle that I do want to cover and why I want to talk about it going to tonight's guest is that what it's really pointing out is there's civil wars going on both sides of the aisle right now. Just earlier yesterday, Nancy Pelosi basically came out saying that in response to AOC and some of the congresswomen that are complaining that they're basically having extra work thrown on them because they're women of color or because of their race. And Pelosi basically was coming out saying that, you know, when you get elected, you need to be elected and serve the people that you actually are voted to represent rather than your Facebook or your Twitter followers. And to me, obviously, it's a very subtle dig of you're basically choosing policy for them. You're not representing your people and you're not thinking about your job. So that's why when we see some of these comments that Trump is making, I mean, he's making a comment almost on the very thing that everyone else is seeing, that there is revolts going on both sides of the party. And that's where you have to kind of start taking a look back going, we know our party and our two-party system is radically broken. We've had people flirting with an independent run, but we know that hasn't really amounted to anything. We don't have any viable third parties. But what we have started seeing is this open air battle, not even a behind the scenes and you hear about it, where you have to read some wonkish, policey, political insider newspaper to find out what the heck's actually going on. No, like this is going on in plain sight for everybody. And so I think it's easy to point the finger at Trump and what Trump is doing, what all this means. But what's going on in open air right now with the Democrats is it's even worse than I think what was happening when the Tea Party started making some noise. At least the Republicans embraced them and brought them in. There's just an open battle between it. And if anything, it's almost like these freshman congressmen that have come in that are very rebel-rousing, very far left. They remind me of children. I don't say it to be belittling or anything, but how many of us have, children or work with children to where they've done something, they've said something pretty bad, and then when they get yelled at or in trouble for it, they simply go, I don't understand why everyone's treating me this way. I don't understand why I'm being punished. I don't understand. This is so unfair. No one else is getting punished. And it's like, dude, do you not just see what you said 5 seconds ago? And it's like with AOC and all of them, she's taking it to be about race, which is absurd. And making it about, or she's making it about race when really it has to do about you won't shut up. And then because of what you just said, you're probably going to have more work thrown on you. So I'm an independent and I'm ashamed of it because it just, regardless, it makes the parties look bad. Now, that seems to be the flavor of the week with the Democrats. Democrats, that wing of their party. But we'd also be remiss not to look at the GOP, the Republican side, and we're having some very public outcry, some very public going against the grain, and one very important case, Representative Justin Amash of Michigan, he straight up just went, I'm not part of this party anymore. And that even went, I believe it was like a month or so before, basically saying that Trump should be impeached, that they are impeachable crimes. And then, and so there's obviously a lot going on. And if you paid attention to Amash's his comments since he has gotten out, he's basically alluded to the same thing of almost, at least the way I'm reading into it, is that you don't look at what I'm doing as just like a GOP thing. This is something that's going on across the aisle, and there's other people that feel the way that I do or feel the way that he does, but almost feels that they can't or don't have the ability to do something about it. And this is where we start getting to the point of, because we're not on the inside, we don't know 100% what is going on. And if we're really going to start interpreting it, or really going to start trying to figure out behind the scenes what's going on, well, we maybe have to start talking to people and asking people that might know these answers. In my line of work as a clinician, doing my family business advising, that a lot of times we couldn't get the right answers. We couldn't get the information that we needed. So we get it from collateral information. If it was a family business, we got it from siblings and other family members. We got it from people that worked underneath them. If it wasn't a family, sometimes we asked the brothers, the sisters, the other family members, the extended family, the friends. Anywhere you can get a different view of the problem, a lot of times you get actually more accurate information, because there's a lot of things people don't say to their family, their spouses, but they'll say it to a friend. Or they'll say it to a family member, not say it to the parent. Sometimes it's not what they're saying. Sometimes it's just the perspective that they have. And so this is where every once in a while you have a really cool opportunity to where somebody that actually has the ability to talk about it and give us that insight. And so luckily, he's a friend of the show. So on that note, Dr. Eric Larson, a Paradox Podcast, welcome back to the show, my man.
Thanks so much for having me back on the couch, Michael. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. It's funny because this is something I've been wanting to talk about, and just like, I guess, a bell ringing in your ear, you literally reached out to me like, hey, man, like this is something I want to get and kind of talk about, because I know I spoke with you about it a couple months ago when some of these things were going down, and it's just, well, I remember I was like, hey, do you think you can hook me up? Have you talked to him? Ask him some questions. Like, well, I think he's kind of busy, Mike. But then now time has kind of passed. Obviously, you've talked with him a lot, and obviously he feels comfortable with you coming out and talking about it a little bit, and probably feels though it's important maybe to come out and say and talk about it, maybe present it in a different way. And so that's why I was so excited that you're able to come on and actually talk about this. So thank you so much, man.
Oh, you're very welcome. Anytime I have an opportunity to talk about what Justin's doing and talk about these things with you, I embrace it. Thanks.
Well, the thing is, like, I dig about it, even before all this went down, before I even knew anything about Justin Amash, because I'm up on politics, but let's be honest. I mean, senators we can keep track of as being, policy or politics kind of wonks, but congressmen, all right, there's a lot of them. So if it's
Yeah.
not in your home state, you don't have a reason to really, you don't really know much about them. But I know one thing that jumped out at me on Facebook. I mean, you were really like, you were putting out videos. You're like, hey, listen to him talk about this, listen to him talk about that. It wasn't about this is what you should believe. It's just, hey, listen to this guy. And I could tell you believe strongly in him. You believe in what he stands for. You believe in what his messaging was. And even throughout all this, it seems like you are, this is somebody that, a lot of us should look at. And you're not the type of person from, my interactions with you, just, you know, uh, put something out there and put your name behind it, because that's what we do. We go, hey, watch this. We're putting our name behind it. And for someone like you, who you're like me, a clinician, we have to think about our reputations and what we stand for, especially in politics and our podcasting. So obviously, it jumps out at me that this is somebody you get behind. And so I guess like where I thought maybe we could start off with is maybe explain a little bit, how do you know Rep. Amash? How long have you known him for? What is it about, him? What does he believe? Just maybe give me a good little rundown in that area and to our listeners. That way we can kind of understand why you're somebody that is worth talking to, that understands this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So Justin and I have been close friends for quite a while now. We first met in 2008. I was involved in I don't know how much you remember the Ron Paul campaign in 2008.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
And there was not much of a campaign structure. And so it was mainly just grassroots meetups back in the day, where you just kind of get together with people who, wanted to support something, in this case, Ron Paul. And so we did unofficial campaigning all the time. And I looked up Justin because he was someone who had donated to the Paul campaign, because there weren't a lot of people who donated to the Ron Paul campaign, and so it wasn't hard in the FEC forums to find out, where those people were and to reach out to them. And I was not able to get a hold of him until after the primary, which was I think it was in January of 2008. However, I noticed that he was on the ballot for running for my state house seat. He was running the primary for an open GOP seat that was going to be most likely won by the wife or former wife of the rep, so same last name for the state rep here in my district. So I reached out to him and said, I see you're running for my house. Would you like to meet? Not sure if that he actually would, but anyway, we met, and I listened. We talked for quite a while. I listened to him talk about why he was running and what he was interested in. And from a political standpoint, we're, almost the same, which is why it's so easy for me to support what he's doing. He's very libertarian. I'm very libertarian, and I remember coming home to my wife at the time. And prior to the Ron Paul campaign, I'd been pretty involved in the Libertarian Party in Michigan. I'd run statewide a couple times. I was involved in the county party here locally. I just sort of left the Libertarian Party just to get involved in the Ron Paul campaign briefly in the Republican Party. And I remember coming home to my wife and saying, well, if he's half as good as what it was when we talked, that he'd be fantastic. And he's, the perfect candidate, which convinced me that he'd lose for sure. Because people people who truly want limited government and who want people to, stay out of your business, generally don't make it in politics. And so I expected that I'd support him for about 3 months, and then, he'd lose, and that'd be that.
That'd be it, yeah.
Yeah, so that's usually how it goes with people I support. Well, it turns out he kept winning. He has never lost.
I'm about to say, he's won some. I was doing my background. He's won some really tough elections too. It's not like it was an easy district that he was in. He really had some tight races, even from a lot of, what was it? I think it was back in 2014 where it was a really bad political smear campaign. Yeah, and he was even coming out and talking out against it. I think it was Devin Nunes was kind of behind a lot of it. And I guess they're saying that he was Al-Qaeda's best friend basically in Congress. Yeah. And he really went out and spoke out against it. He's way against gerrymandering. I was really surprised because usually it seems like you don't hear congressmen talking about that. All you really hear is, well, they do it to us, so we should do it. He actually is very much against it. It seems like a lot of the BS he's against, the political hit jobs, the gerrymandering, it seems like if you look at, and that's not just what he says, you look at how he votes, those are the things that jumped out without knowing any of his big policy positions. He is against a lot of the BS that's happening in politics.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I think uh, in a would contrast him with other people who are libertarians who are very focused on policies, reducing spending and foreign wars and those sorts of things. He is, but he is by training he's an attorney, and so he's very concerned with the process, and he thinks the process is tantamount to making sure we have a government that functions properly. Now, depending on how big you think the government should be, I don't know, but I think most people agree that we should have some sort of discourse, a deliberative process, a discovery process within our legislature, so that all voices can be heard, theoretically representing all the sort of multi views that would be in the population, either in the state or the country, and then you discover sort of where people want to end up on legislation. Now, obviously, it doesn't always work exactly that way. I mean, it's the sausage making, it's the classics, explanation for how legislation's made. However, he's always felt process is the most important thing, and that goes along with gerrymandering, right? You can't have a process that's not fair and that doesn't allow everyone's voice to be heard. And so that's what he's really been out, which makes him a little bit more unusual, but it also explains his op-ed that he put on July 4th. But I mean, I guess, as far as our relationship, we've become very close. I mean, I know I've spoken to you before. My son passed away in August. He was there that night. He was at the funeral. So we're very close. Our wives are close friends. And so I've spent a lot of time with him. I've gotten to know him, both his legislative, actions, which you can follow online, but also sort of behind the scenes things and the motivations and, what makes him tick.
So it seems like from what I've been able to kind of gather, even though you can kind of go back as I laid out some of the major things that jumped out at me about partisan politics and just the ugly underbelly of politics. But it seemed like, and correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe there's some other things he was saying this, but it seemed like everything kind of started in basically the 2016 election when he was one of the first candidates that really came out against the Trump nomination. He was one of the list of Republicans that opposed Trump as a GOP nominee. And he was also one of the people that was probably one of the most outspoken against him. And even once Trump got elected, he was one of the few Republicans that was against him. But then, one of the few that stayed against him. Would you say, was that the final straw for him, or was there even inklings of this even before the 2016 election?
I think it's fair to say we've been discussing the independence aspect of it for a number of years, well before Trump. I think it's really hard if you just sort of pay attention a tiny bit to politics, or just you watch Fox or MSNBC, bless your soul if you actually manage to watch those. But if you watch those, you get a very distorted view of what's going on. And I think it's definitely intentional by both parties. And I would say they're both complicit in sort of the rancor that goes on, both at the state levels and the national levels, and spills over in just, our everyday interactions with other people, which is what's happening. I think we're seeing more of the last couple of years. I think we were talking about this last time I was on. And so I would say I would even say that he never really opposed Trump. He didn't endorse him. He was kind of getting down to the end where he initially endorsed Rand Paul, and then he was like, well, I guess I like Cruz more than Trump. His concern really always was that Trump didn't have a handle on how government worked, and he did not think he was genuine in how he was going to drain the swamp. And so that was his main concern with Trump. He just did not think he had small government sort of policies, which is what Justin prefers. And so I don't think he ever really opposed him. I think he's applauded him a number of times when he's cut back some regulations, and there are a couple of laws and things he's pushed. But for the most part, he's not really been very happy with Trump. But probably not much different than he was with Obama. Justin, I think, ultimately has always been fairly independent, and it's why we've been talking about the party thing. I think it's really hard to recognize what the party does, and I think people overstate what the parties do and what their power is. I mean, they have a significant amount of power. There's the name ID, there's the brand, right? The R, the D, and people sort of toss themselves into one of the two camps. But as you probably know, less and less people consider themselves either an R or D, Team Red or Team Blue. I think we're looking at 26% are Republicans, 27% are self-described Democrats, and the rest are just independents. Now, probably people lean one way or the other in general, but I think what you're seeing is the parties lose their strength, and they're becoming. And as Justin's described, he thinks they're becoming very weak. It's kind of hard to see that, but I think because they're becoming so small, they're losing a lot of the other voices within their parties, and so they become almost more shrill and partisan, and maybe the fringe kind of starts running the parties a little more than before, and they definitely start to kind of fall apart. And I think that's what you were describing earlier when you're talking about the problems with AOC and Nancy Pelosi and in some ways with Justin and the Freedom Caucus before in dealing with Boehner and Ryan and Trump. You have people who are committed to a process or to having their voice heard. And I would give AOC an excuse and Omar and whoever else, the people that Pelosi is upset with, because Congress is so fantastically dysfunctional. I think when these people come to Congress, they expect to have their voice heard. They expect to have the ability to make a difference, offer amendments. You see AOC, she's coming in, she's got the Green New Deal, and she's got her other policies, which I don't personally agree with, but she doesn't even have the opportunity really to even bring them forth to the House floor, to debate them, to bring them to committees, because the Congress now is 100% run by the Speaker. When Justin described it as last town hall, which was after the whole thing we came out with Trump and the impeachment, which we can talk about a little bit, but I think the real interesting thing that people don't recognize is that there are the normal House rules. Those are like the rules of amending and voting and all those sorts of things, and speaking, and those are the ones that have been established for 150 years or whatever is the House of Representatives. And one of the first votes that happens every week is that the House votes to suspend those rules, and by suspending those rules, they yield all the rules and all the order of the House goes through the Speaker's office. The Speaker demands this power, and so now you have basically settlements. You have negotiations amongst like four people, and if you are not one of those four people, like leadership, you have no voice at all in government essentially, and so you just go up to you go there, and the expectation is that now you have to vote however the Speaker or your leader, if the minority leader is how they vote. They tell you to vote. They give you a sheet of paper that says how you vote in every amendment and every bill. And unless you have some sort of parochial concern, like, there's something in your district, for the most part, you're expected to, in lock, vote that way.
So what now?
And because you've seated all.
Well, what's the leverage they have though? And that's the thing where it's like you go, no, I'm not going to vote that way. What has Amash said that? What's the leverage they have over them that keeps the wheels turning? I guess. Well,
so by giving away all your voting, right? Why would they even see the rules to the Speaker? Well, the reason is because the Speaker has all the access to all the PAC money, which about 70% or more of the congressional campaign funds come from special interest lobbyists. And so if the Speaker said, "Hey, you've got to vote this way in the budget," and they say, "I'm not, opposed to that," they'll say, "Well, fine, I'm going to make sure that you're not the lobby money just dries up." And so Justin gets 0.1% of his campaign funds come from. So he's really never had any money from lobbyists ever after the first year when they realized that, this guy's not someone who's going to play ball with us for leadership. And so then they strip you your committee chairs. And the reason a lot of these guys and women have to follow leadership is because they'll lose all their money. They'll lose their opportunity to have a seat at the table. I think they delude themselves in saying, well, at sometimes I can say something and maybe get an amendment put in. And so it is sort of like a childish, when you look at it, it's like a childish spat, like why are these young kids coming in and they're so upset, and it's not, they just need to kind of just grow up. But in some ways it's actually exactly how you'd expect to perform. You show up in the Congress and you got to do all this committee work, but I predetermine everything and how everything's going to go through the committee. I predetermine your chairs. I predetermine all your votes. I mean, you're essentially stripped of any ability of any sort of independent thinking. And so I would be rebelled, and so that's why I think you see people go into Congress and they're there for 1 or 2 terms and they leave. Yeah. And the ones who stick around are generally the ones who are going to I guess this is just the way the game's played. And it doesn't matter if it's Democrats, it doesn't matter if it's Republicans. The process is the same. And so as long as the process is that way, I think you end up with a lot of infighting because you don't have the ability to sort of let out that steam, right? You don't have the ability to debate and discuss things and arrive at any sort of decision. I think, you saw that with Obamacare. There was just like 4 people who decided what this bill was. The legislators never got to know what was in it. Right. They just had to vote based on their party. And it was crazy. But
it was the same thing with the tax cut, the Trump tax cut. It was that no one, they had what, eight hours to read, 1,800 pages or something like that.
Yeah, and so no one could, right? And so when you have just the leadership controlling everything in either party, you're going to have this. I think you're going to have this very dysfunctional, and that's the partisan death spiral that Justin described
and that's really, that was the thing that jumped out at me. Like when I really, because I wasn't really sure. Like I was like, well, I'm going to check this guy because I know you were talking about him, and it was funny because I'm not going to lie, I didn't put 2 and 2 together because I remember the congressman that you were supporting, and then the name, and I was like, wait a minute, this is the same person, and that's when I was just like, oh, and that's when I started looking a little further into it, and so I wasn't really sure what to expect when he came out and started talking about his reasons. But I mean, I look even some of his quotes, like, I'm declaring independence from partisan politics, talking about how Congress no longer functioned as an independent legislative body anymore. Basically, what do you say? We're fast approaching the point where Congress exists as little more than as a formality to legitimize outcomes dictated by the president, the speaker, the House, and the Senate Majority Leader. And everything was one implication after another about Congress and the political parties and the roles everyone had, and that basically the only way that we're going to save this is if people start becoming independents and getting away from it. But this is where I don't understand, and it's like, is there more to the story? Because now I think more than any point in time, people are really hungry for an independent candidate. We have more people identifying as an independent now more than ever. If it was just about money, wouldn't it just be about an independent figuring out how to tap into that money and utilizing it and not having to worry about the lobbyist and the BS of the political parties? And if it's really all about money, wouldn't then, especially if the parties are getting less and less power, wouldn't it be easier just to do that? But we don't really see anybody doing that at all. I mean, this is why Amash was such a big deal, because this is a sitting congressman that was calling out both parties and how dysfunctional our government is. So is there something else we're missing here as to why more people just aren't doing this? Because he even referenced there's multiple people that feel the way that he does, but then they won't do it. It almost seems like out of fear. It almost seems like an abusive relationship, and one person decided to get out while the other's afraid they're going to get beat if they run and don't get caught.
Well, they'll definitely get beaten, and that's what he's been relegated to the sidelines, and it says as far as leadership's concerned since he's been in Congress, because they've stripped him of his budget. He had a seat at the budget. He voted for 5 of the budgets, and then one of them came up and with Paul Ryan as the chair, and he's like, this is just too much spending. And then they kicked him out the budget because he didn't vote that one time. So that's the mindset. And how the party's so powerful. I mean, yes, they're weak, but they are powerful in the sense that most people are not paying attention to politics, which is probably a good thing in general, because if you're spending a lot of time paying attention to politics, you're not paying attention to things that probably should matter more in your life, like your family and your job and the Little League and stuff like that. If people are like have 99% voting records, or something, that means that there's a real problem. If everyone feels like compelled, like if they vote, it's the end of the world, right? And so when it comes to the smaller offices like State House or your state legislature, people really don't pay any attention to it. I ran for State House actually, and most people didn't even know that we had one. I would go up to the door. They'd say, "Oh, you ran for Congress?" "No, I'm actually running for State House." "Oh, is that like in D.C.?" "Nope, it's in Lansing."
What exactly
really?
Does a state rep do exactly?
Yeah, right, exactly. And so there, the branding really matters. And so Justin's point is that with the social media, with the ability to bypass gatekeepers, you're going to be able to brand yourself and personally and have an independent sort of branding, I guess. So people don't feel like they can go run for Congress because you have to have enough name ID or whatever. You got to have some way of bypassing the usual sort of process. I mean, you could have $10 million, but it's not going to buy a seat if people think you're a jerk. So you can have as much money as you want, and so money is important, but it's not the only thing that's important. But I mean, if you're going to lose 75% of your funding by dumping the party, you got to think twice doing it. So that's why people are very careful about that, especially if they think that their committee seat, which determines if they're voting the right way in the committee, the finance committee, let's say, and now they start voting the wrong way compared to as far as leadership is concerned, they'll get stripped of their seat, and now the banks, Goldman Sachs, will stop giving them money or whatever, the bundling the money and stuff. So, I think ultimately the parties are strong, but I think Justin's attempting through this his high profile move to expose them for what they are, and I think people will see it. How well
what's the net effect? What has the net effect been? Because I think you're going to have the public, right? The public responses, the public, what we can see on the outside. But as a friend, I imagine you're going to get a lot more than what we would get. What has the blowback basically been for him by making this decision? What does he think? How does he think all this is going to play out? Because I know it was like right afterwards, there was already a challenger, like a former National Guard member, already saying, "Hey, I'm going to challenge you." So, what has it been like for him? The decision, the blowback. What has he kind of alluded to of how it's been for him and what the party has basically been doing?
Well, the party's been, like I said, the party's been nothing but trying to stop him ever since he's been even in state legislature. They've always run. I'll use the term establishment. I don't know if that's the right term, but people who are sort of part of the party structure, or people who are okay with the party leadership because they know they'll toe the line. So he's always had people like the guy you mentioned in 2014, Brian Ellis, who outraised him, spent like $1 million of his own money, had the Farm Bureau, Chamber of Commerce, NRA, Right to Life, all behind him, and he still lost by it's like 15 points or something. So the party's always been against him. So there's nothing new. And so the party's really never offered him anything except, I guess, the R behind his name, and how much value that is really questionable. When you look at his totals, he always is outperforming the higher profile candidates, the Republicans in the district, and probably 20, we guess like 20 or 30% a crossover from Democrats votes. So what's happened since he's gone independent? So he had primary challenges anyway. He already had one, and then as soon as the Mueller report came out, he had to come in with his assessment of that. Then a bunch of people jumped in, thought they saw blood in the water. They thought this is their opportunity. But as soon as he's gone independent, it's been liberating for him. I mean, he's able to speak a lot more freely, because the thing is, even though he was not part of the team, he was part of the Republican Party, but he didn't play party politics. He had a lot of friends. I mean, he has a lot of friends in the Congress, and you don't want to put them in uncompromising positions all the time. And so you have to be a little restrained in what you say. I mean,
right.
You may not think your team's always making the right move, but you're not going to be criticizing the head coach all the time. Or
or especially if someone is saying on the front side, "Oh yeah, I feel that way," and then 3 seconds later they go back and tell the coach.
Yeah,
like,
right.
So and so is talking about you don't like your play call, man. I didn't say that, but he's the one that said it.
Yeah, so I think. I mean, there is some sort of maturity and not always just coming out against your team. That being said, I think now that he's a lot freer to criticize Trump's decisions, his tweets. He's freer to criticize like Nancy Pelosi and her dictatorial running of the House now as Speaker. And so he's had really very positive, overwhelmingly positive support from people who are in the community, because partly from Democrats, because now they feel more free in voting for him because he's no longer on the wrong team. And then there are plenty of Republicans who are just kind of sick of the same thing too. I think he's left people, the ones who are the hardcore partisans, he's probably lost some of them just because, they call him a traitor and all these, crazy things, because his, as he stated in his piece, his allegiance to the Constitution, it's not to the president or to the party or anything like that. But there are people who are, they're very tribal on the red team, blue team, and so that's all they care about. And that's the problem with the parties, is that all they care about is winning. They don't care about the destination. They just care about having the power, because the administrative state that continues running on its own, and it's sort of propped up by the leadership of the parties. And I guess it only determines the speed you're traveling, but you're always traveling the same direction.
I mean, are there are there like discussions? I mean, I know sometimes there's things that he probably can't even tell you, being his best friend, but like, has he ever alluded to, like, or are there conversations among congressmen on both sides of the aisle going, hey, listen, man, what if we all banded together? I mean, think about the stuff that we always do, like whether it be in college, whether it be even like for our podcasting or off-air conversations. Like, imagine if we all of us, just like-minded, all just joined together and we were able to kind of like run for this or do this, and we would change the whole system. I mean, are there conversations like that where
Yeah.
people try to, I mean, what does he say? Like, how far along does it go? How, I mean, are we talking this is legitimate conversations people have to basically leave in mass and try to fix this thing?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you look at when he formed the Freedom Caucus. So he formed with Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, and some other people, Raul Labrador and Ted Yoho, a bunch of the, I guess you'd say the more serious conservative / libertarian people in the House, and they were all Republicans. They formed the Freedom Caucus primarily to open up the discussion. They had, with Boehner was the current speaker, it was a very closed system. I mean, it's very little that you could do to affect legislation. And so they banded together, and their main focus was to make sure that we have a process where our voice is heard, because as I just told you, the problem is that you're not allowed to, if you deviate from the leadership's positions, which is dictated by, the moneyed interest in DC or whatever, you're not going to really truly have much of a voice at all in DC, or if you do, you're going to lose it quickly. And so they thought, if we have a process, if we find someone who can serve as the speaker, we can demand that we have an open amendment process and whatever. And so that's why they basically are the ones, they banded together. It was a secret cabal. It was like it was a secret cabal, sort of. They had enough votes to oust Boehner. And so they basically told him that's what's going to happen. And so he just, had to resign. But that's not any sort of secret. That's out there. But the problem is that they got Ryan, who's even worse. He had the most closed Congress. And so, and then they got Trump. And the reason that they fell apart with Trump, and now they're sort of, I guess you'd call, I don't want to say sycophantic, but they definitely are very supportive of him. If you recall, right at the beginning, he was very much at odds with the Freedom Caucus when he was trying to push through his changing the Medicare or the Obamacare, whatever the legislation. And it was excruciating for those guys, because everybody, they have to all stick together. They recognize all the money that's at stake and the risk for their seats. And eventually they agreed to something, and so they actually had a voice in it. But that was probably the last time they had a significant voice. And then they started getting picked off by the establishment. Mark Sanford, Raul Labrador, and they just, they're just disappearing because the established money is taking them out. And so the ones who are there are just kind of, well, I guess this is the game we're going to have to play. And I mean, it's sad, but so, I mean, things do happen, but it's the amount of courage it takes to do something like that, to go against really your instincts of survival. It's, I guess it's easy for us to say, well, they're just, it's just a stupid job.
It's your I mean, it really is. It's your
but
career.
That's their career.
I mean, yeah, it is.
Or that was their dream, right? To go there and make a difference. I mean, even if you say they're not career politicians, some of them were, or whatever, but I would say most people who go to Congress probably have something that they want to do, or some good they want to do. I mean, I'm going to give people that credit. Not always the case, but let's just say in general. And so that, it's kind of dashing if you get there and it's all just taken away from you for nothing. And so that's
and I think where it's tough, because and I do empathize, and I think you worded it very well, because I think as clinicians, for us, I think we have a Hippocratic oath. We have this, we have this very strong belief, of helping people, and we know there's very fine lines, black and white lines, may be a little bit gray, if for a moral decision, but if morally where you're at, it's very black and white. And I don't know about you, but I know as a clinician, I've had opportunities where I could have gone into business with people. I could have done certain things that I didn't morally believe in. I didn't think it was right. And I could have made a ton of money, but I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But that very decision had nothing to do with my career. And those decisions were even somewhat tough, because, like, am I being an idiot? Am I being too principled here? Because why would I turn that down? I don't know what that would have been like if it was not only am I doing that, and on top of that, I might lose my job. That's a whole different thing, because that's, and it has to be scary, the money part, knowingly that if I piss my party up, they're going to come at me. I mean, they're really going to come after me, and it's going to be ugly. But I think a guy like Amash, though, because he's almost battle worn. He's had the kitchen sink thrown at him, and he's always come out alive. So maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is that probably one of the big reasons why he felt so confident in making this decision? Because he basically has been through it all already. What else are they going to throw at him?
Yeah, he's an unusual guy in the sense that, and I don't know what the clinical diagnosis would be. Maybe you know, but he doesn't really care what people say about him and what they think. And I'm not that way. I know most people I know care what people think about them, how they think about them, and politicians for the most part are that way. And so it's almost it's kind of unusual in that he doesn't really care. I mean, he cares like what his wife thinks or what his friends. If I say something or his brothers, but for the most part, he doesn't really care, and so that emboldens him, and he's able to say that he tells stories about what he'd say in the Republican caucus. I'm like, this is a guy who's like a first-term person speaking sort of against the speaker in their closed caucus, saying, I think we should do X, Y, or Z. I don't think it's a good idea. I'm sure they're like, you're the young guy, new guy, just be quiet, right? But he's always had that confidence that, and some people would probably describe as arrogance, I suppose. But I think he's not arrogant in the sense that he's a lot of self-confidence, but he does not. But he is very empathetic too. I mean, he definitely sees people's plight. So
well, and I think and this is interesting. We have a question from the hospital bed. We have Bill Reed. He's wishing he could be here, and he actually sent out a picture of him eating a hot dog, I think, on his hospital bed. But he's like, dude, all right, you got to ask a question for him. I'm like, dude, come on, I'm gonna have to. So from the hospital bed, Bill was actually wondering that, and I think Amash, for Rep. Amash, you were kind of clear with this, but I think he's wondering about, is there a strong sense, especially among people that really believed in the party, is there a strong sense of them feeling like traitors, that them leaving almost is like, I'm quitting, I'm giving up on it, I've lost my chance at trying to change everything? Or is he asking, is it that the knowledge of knowing and doing what's right is what overrides all of it for the people that have actually tried to make this decision?
Boy, so is he asking, like, do you think like what the voters think, or like
I think that was a question I was going to ask you later on, actually. But we can ask it as like a two-parter: is does Rep. Amash feel as that at any point in time, do you feel like he was being a traitor to his party, to the people that supported him as a Republican in voting? Is there that sentiment at all from what you've been able to pick up on?
No, it's interesting. So when he's he's held a number of town halls, and when I say number, he's held hundreds. I mean, way more than most reps, I think. And he always lets everybody ask questions. He just walks around, hands a microphone to people, so it's very informal in many ways, and he's gotten very good at it. And I think if anything, he feels now it's a little bit easier for him to. For people to, feel comfortable that he can represent them more effectively, because I think there's always the assumption that if you're a Democrat and however he votes one way or the other, it was, well, there's partisan reasons, or he's just going along with Trump, or, whatever, And so there are, without a doubt, there are people who think that because he's left the party that he is, sold a false bill of goods. But I don't think that many people really vote for the party. I mean, I think people vote for someone they think is going to represent their party well, perhaps. Who's someone who's going to do what they say they're going to do, and he feels like he never felt he was elected because he's a Republican. He felt people elected him and chose him because of the principles that he ran on, his adherence to the Constitution and process and those sorts of things. So he doesn't really feel that it's important to the party label is, it was like he was faking it out. I mean, the party kind of just changed also, I think, significantly in the last 8 years since he's been.
And that's what I was going to ask is, like, do you think it's now more a matter of, like, almost internal polling and just the way things are? It's now more than ever people are going, hey, I'm voting for a representative. Maybe a small minority of people vote for party, but the vast majority of people that you're representing me. You think it's the time is just now right to where internally now people are willing and able to say that as a voter, I don't care. Whereas maybe 4 years ago, 6 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't think we'll know until next election.
Yeah.
But I think, I do think that the fact that he's been serving and he's been consistent in how he responds to legislation, how he votes, how he responds to constituents, and how he plays politics. I think people have generally respect for him. They know how he operates, know what he's going to do, and so I think as an independent, it allows him a lot more flexibility in at least more credence in front of them. So I think they're less likely to think that they're more likely to give him a chance as an independent. Now, if I were just to jump in and I'm an unknown, it might be hard for people to say, I'm going to vote for this guy. I'd rather just pick someone who probably is going to do generally what I think is good as a Democrat or Republican. But he's built up that, the gravitas or whatever you want to call it over the last 8 years in Congress. So I think I'm fairly confident he'll win.
But what's his internal polling saying? I don't know if you can comment on that. Is this internal? Because it'd be a three-way run now. You have a Democrat, a Republican, an independent in his district. What is polling saying? I mean, is he feeling pretty good about it so far?
I've not seen any polling, but I would say that this district is Republican leaning, but not heavily. I mean, it's like R+5 or 4 or something. It's not a very red state in general, Michigan, but it's on this side of the state it's slightly Republican. But in a wave year or a bad candidate or something, you could easily have the seat flipped, and it's much more Democratic than it was even when he first entered office in 2010. Because Obama won this district, I think, twice. I think he won in 2008 and in 12, and Trump nearly won it in 2016.
Now, here's the $1,000,000 question that I kind of have, and this might be one either that A, you might have the answer to, and you guys have talked about, or it might be B, please ask him this and get back to us, and we'll have you back on to get the answer to it. It'll be dope if we can get him on, but you are every bit as awesome as him. So here's the problem I look at, and being somebody who created a podcast that is about being in the middle and really trying to give a voice to the people that aren't left or right, Democrat, Republican, and there's a lot of us out there. You're trying to organize it. You're trying to tap into it. You're trying to be a conduit for it. And it's tough, right? Now, whenever I see somebody doing what Amash did, one, it took cojones. I mean, but knowing what you've told me about him, what I've read about him, it was an easy decision. This was what was right. The timing was right. And I just couldn't do it anymore. And he was doing it for all the right reasons. And even if it was more difficult, which is awesome. But that being said, though, every time I've seen something like this, somebody steps out against the party. Sometimes a worse thing happens than a mafia style, they accidentally fell down, a flight of stairs 1,500 times, right? And broke their legs. How tragic, right? But it's more like the worst thing happens. They die a slow death of political asphyxiation, basically. They slowly disappear, none to be heard again. Much like an IndyCar or a NASCAR driver in the draft, thinking that they have enough momentum to make the move. They go make the move, no one goes with them, and they go to the back. And that's the thing I worry about with this, that we have these people that have the balls to basically come out and legitimately, not for Twitter followers, not because they know they're not going to get reelected and they're thinking about that news anchor or that news blogger position. It's legitimately, I want to change all of this. I don't like it, and this is the route that I think I want to do it. What is it that the people can do that would help support these people? I mean, what is it that other congressmen, what is it they've done wrong that they should be doing so he isn't one of the people where it's 20 years from now, people are going, who? Amash? Do I remember anyone like that? Like, what has he told you? Or are those things where maybe I should ask him of, what is it that people can do to make it to where this move that he made basically isn't all for naught?
Well, I mean, I think that's incumbent on the American people.
Yeah,
and if fundamentally you have to support people who make those decisions. I mean, most people who leave the party join the other.
It's
they
true.
Go independent. They caucus the other party because there's either there's some spat with leadership, they've lost some power within the party, or the other party's taking power and they want a good committee seat or something like that. So yeah, it's very unusual what he's doing, and I don't know the answer to any of that because I fundamentally it's just only time will tell, right? I mean,
yeah.
So let's look at a couple of possibilities. Let's say he runs for Congress in the 3rd district as independent, and let's say he wins. Well, that's going to change the calculations everywhere for all sorts of things, right? I mean, you're going to have other people who may think maybe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says this Democratic Party's, this blows. I'm just going to be, I want to be able to say what I want. I don't want someone telling me what I can't say. It just depends on people being bold and doing things. But I think until people see a success, I mean, these politicians just respond to signals, and they're rational in that sense, right? If they see that this is a winning strategy, they're going to seize upon it. Just like you've seen people who suddenly think that they can be just like Trump, and that's what wins. Well, probably what won is that he was Trump, right? I mean, and that he was running against Clinton. I mean, so that could be entirely the reason the whole thing worked out, right? So, I mean, if Justin loses, well, then I guess then it depends what he does next, and if he can maintain some profile and can push things forward. I don't know. I mean, there's almost an infinite amount of possibilities of things he could do, and I think we just kind of see how this plays out for the next year or so.
And I think like the thing that, and I would love for you to ask him or at least pass this on to him, because I think the problem is that, and I think he was more forthcoming than anything, because if anything, we've seen like guys like Paul Ryan, they'll talk about these things after they've left, after they've retired. And it's like, me being the clinician that I am, I'm always sitting there going, well, what is so messed up, or what leverage do they have on you that it's like, man, if you even like, you have to wait till you're out to say anything. Like, you won't even say it. It's like, it's so damn easy to come out and say all this stuff when you have no power anymore. It's like, why can't you say this when you actually have the ability to change it? And I think a lot of us don't really know 100% why things are the way that they are. There's so much crap out there, so much rhetoric. Everyone's pulled in one direction. It's almost like there's so many independent-minded people out there. I think it's almost like, can someone like Amash sit down and go, listen, here's the blueprint. This is the reason why I was able to do it, but other people can't. I'm telling you right now, think about it, we've done this with our allies in the Middle East and elsewhere, to where it's like, listen, we'll support you if this happens. Just trust us. If you're going to fight, was it like just like the Kurds in Iraq? We knew that if they knew that we were going to support them, they would fight in our side. And it's like, I'm wondering if all these people that he referenced that feel the same way he does, if we all knew the reasons why they wouldn't do it, what if every one of us then were able then to go and maybe assuade those fears, come out and talk specifically to it, to give them the confidence to come out and actually support us. If they know we're going to stand behind them, support them. That's what I think is missing from the equation. If someone like him can come out and say, this is a blueprint of why other people aren't, but if you go to them, you write to them, you get enough people, if you take the 5 reasons why none of them are doing it and speak specifically to that, and say, this is the guarantees that this is what we're going to do, I think you'd get more people. And instead of it being just him, maybe in the next election we could have 10 people that are technically independents, and they could form their own caucus. And then on a 50-50 Congress, 50-50 Senate for the most part, 10, 15, 20 votes, let's be honest, that's a major bill right there. Potentially they could become the most powerful caucus and party that isn't even a party in Congress. That's all you need is 20, maybe. All you need is maybe 4 or 5 in the Senate. We're not talking about much. So if you could pass that on to him and have him, listen, what's the blueprint? Who are those people? And what can we do to speak to them? I think that could be a game changer. Just we don't have that yet.
Yeah, well, and again, I think you have to show that you can be successful and survive. And then you have people who might be more bold, but you also have to have people who are willing, who are principled in the same way, and have the same way of defending their votes and defending their actions. They have to have a fundraising base, and his is obviously all based on individual donors. It's not massive, but I think it's probably going to be bigger now after what he's done.
Yeah.
So I mean, because most of the money that goes into politics is coming from large corporations and large lobbying firms, unions, and those sorts of things. And so you have to find a way to fund and see to your message out in some way. And then are Americans willing to? Do they care enough about it to really do something about it? I mean, I think that most people are getting a little tired of just the outrage that's in the volume that's going on right now in politics. I just feel like it's not Trump as a symptom. He's not the cause, and this was happening before he got there. But with social media, it probably amplifies a little bit. But I just feel like the country it's kind of boiling over, and I think somebody just needs to pull the lid off and just let the steam out. And I think maybe that's what Justin's going to do. Maybe he can ignite just a level of civility, and people say, everybody just calm down. It's going to be okay. Let's just talk.
That's I think all what we want. We want the adult in the room, and I think that's all we really. I think we're just dying to look for that right now, and I think he's trying to do that. And I just wish that he had more people behind him, all saying the same thing, because that's something that gets a country's attention when you have 50 sitting senators all going, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, and this is what's messed up. These are the questions you should be asking. There's always going to be strength in numbers, and so I hope that he's able to keep this run going, and I hope he's able to convince other people to do the same, because that is truly how I think we can change things in a good direction. And I'm going to cross my fingers. Before we bug out of here and everything, if you could channel your inner Amash, and if he were here and he would listen, if you're going to take, because let's be honest, the American public, we have a short attention span. If everyone's going to be putting a spin on this thing, right? What it means, why somebody's doing it. What is the big takeaway? If there's only one big point, if only one thing anyone's really going to walk away with, or one thing that he would want people really to know about this whole move, and moreover, what would make it to where it wasn't it wasn't worthless, that it meant something. Even if he didn't get elected, it still meant something. What do you think that would be? What do you think he would tell us all?
Well, I think, the key really is you have to everyone needs to take a step back and look at really what's going on. And you are being played by the parties against each other because they are committed just to winning. They're not committed to process. They're not committed to actually getting things done. And you have to just recognize that and just not see other people as worthless, as less than human, as the other team is always wrong and my team's always right. You just need to sit back and just say, hey, these parties are really the problem. And doesn't mean that parties will always be the problem, and maybe even if you were to have enough independence, like you were saying, you form another caucus, and then you're a new party. Maybe the parties just need to be realigned. I don't know, but I mean, the way it works right now is people just need to recognize that the parties are where the dysfunction lies. The problem is not that Pelosi is at odds with Trump. The problem is that the parties don't allow any other voices to be heard. And so there's no ability for anyone to get another voice out. And so there's all this rage that comes out because no one has an opportunity to have their opinions expressed. And I think if we just allow that, it will be a lot healthier for this country.
Yeah, and I think it's a patriotic duty that he's doing, and I think we need more people like him to be able to step up and do the same things. I think we all need that. If anything, as a country, sometimes when those elective officials, as you and I kind of talked about, when the parents give you permission to, feel something, talk about something, or to be okay with something, even if it's not good, then everyone else starts speaking out. And I think that's all we're looking for. We're looking for that guidance, and we're not getting it, obviously, from a lot of our leaders. If anything, we're reinforcing it in the wrong way. So just be sure to pass on to your friend there that we all appreciate what he's doing, and and that just to keep up the fight regardless of whatever it is, because we need for this to happen. The only thing I would ask is that just tell them, even if it's in code, like I can't say what rep is ready to maybe leave, but their name rhymes with Delosi or something like that, or rhymes with Funyuns, or I don't know, just anything like that, anything he can go off of, I would appreciate, even if it's like a word association game. I can't stress enough that we need, I think, us independent-minding, Americans that are doing what we do for love out of country, even if it comes at a sacrifice. We need that guidance. So any way that him and other people can give us a little bit more, I think we need that. We need to know what's going on behind the scenes so it all makes sense. But I appreciate what he did. I appreciate you coming on the air and talking for him. I appreciate your friend letting you come on and speak for him. And I know that's not an easy thing to do. And so we appreciate that. And of course, always appreciate having on the air, Dr. Larson. Tell everybody where they can find you, the podcast, whatever plug you want to throw out there.
Sure. So you listen in at the Paradox podcast. So it's Paradocs. You can find me at the Paradox Show or at Eric L. Larson on Twitter. My show is healthcare related, so we talk about various things in the healthcare delivery system, and not surprisingly, some are kind of messed up. And so we talk about innovative ways that people are disrupting that and working around and solving problems. And so it's not just focusing on the problems, because there are plenty of them, but there are people who are actually getting things done. And so we talk about that both for physicians and people who are in the lay public who just have a better understanding of what's going wrong and then how people are fixing those problems. So you can find any podcast player, obviously. And I guess, follow on Twitter. And then I would, if you have not, I would follow Justin at Justin Amash on Twitter. And I think what you're going to start seeing, especially if things are going to move, I think you'll start seeing a lot more people speaking up in Congress, and maybe you'll have people, especially on the other side of the aisle, and well, I guess not the other side now for him, but the Democrats, and see if they start challenging the process problems, and you start seeing more of a revolt against Pelosi, as you see maybe the party structure kind of breaks down a little bit in the leadership. I mean, I think that'll be the most telling sign what happens in the next year, if that's where you might see it, even though you won't see people officially declare their independence.
It may not be the sexiest of headlines or of stories, but procedure, as seems what Rep. Amash is telling us, dude, it's all in the procedure. The procedure is where the power is. Change procedure, and then you start getting somewhere. And so there's something to that. But thank you so much for coming on the air. Appreciate it as always.
Always.
It's the only way that we're ever going to be able to know what to do, how to kind of work, is by people talking, people communicating. It's what this show's about. It's what all these shows are about, and I just think it's awesome that we have this little cadre of people that we're all believing in the same thing. We're all wanting to talk with each other and use our voices that we have with our clients, our listeners, to get that out there. And all we can keep doing is just gathering more people for that party. And so we know we at least got a congressman on our side here, so can't beat that, right? So on that note, I want to thank my guest, Dr. Larson, coming on the show. Rep. Amash, you're not here, but you're here in spirit, so we appreciate you. And all the other quiet congressmen and senators out there, we don't know who you are, but apparently there's more of you hiding in the bushes. And I'm telling you, it's okay to come out. The hug, we got you, all right? So, all right, everybody. Everyone give a big shout out to the armchair QB, resting in a hospital, still throwing out some texts. So he's still alive and with us. So hopefully we'll get him back on the air next week. And if not, just go to thearmchairqb.net and just make fun of him. That should make him angry enough to come out of the hospital bed. It's a big enough house here. We can handle him walking through with an IV. But on that note, everybody, I'm Michael Devine, on behalf of myself, Reporters Network. And remember, everybody, next time someone asks you, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're left, you're right, you're red, you're blue, say, fuck that noise. My ass is gray. All right, everybody. Appreciate ya, and you be good to each other. We'll see you next week. Peace.